Good evening, everyone. Emory Moynagh here for In His Image, and today we got a lot to talk about today. Today's video is going to be a follow-up video from, I guess maybe a condensation video of James Lindsay's video that was put out last week or the week before on New Discourses, which was titled, well, I can't repeat the title because it used a cuss abbreviation in it, but he effectively asked the question, what is social-emotional learning? So what is social-emotional learning? And I think this video, Lindsay has hit the nail squarely on the head. Lindsay has hit exactly what is going on in the world, and I think it's very explanatory, but it's 3 hours long. I'll link to the video. You can go listen to it later. I would recommend you do. I will warn you, he does swear a fair bit in this because he's worked up, and I don't blame him for being worked up. So let's talk about what social-emotional learning is. Basically, this is a summary video, and I'm going to add my own thoughts as we go along. And if Dr. Lindsay, if you see this and you don't like the fact that I've done this, that's fine. I'll take it down. That's fine. What is social-emotional learning? Well, it is a program that has been instituted in American public school system. It is just about every state curriculum in the U.S. I think even Florida has a social and emotional learning department. The social and emotional learning pushed by an organization called CASEL. The goal with CASEL is that the goal of CASEL is to push this social and emotional learning idea into the public school system. Now, the idea here is that you're pushing social and emotional competencies. So you're no longer just filling out an academic competency, like this student has an A in biology, they have a B in math, they have a B in language, they have a C in what other class? Spanish. Well, we're no longer giving them that kind of competency. We're also including on at least one social or emotional competency. Now, what do we mean by a social or emotional competency? Well, here's a question you could ask. What does it mean to be a boy? What does it mean to be a girl? How can you confront your racism? Or how can you be an ally to those people who are trying to fight racism, or trying to fight injustice, or trying to fight transphobia, or Islamophobia, or whatever other phobia you want to stick in that little checkbox? That is a social and emotional competency. And that is what is being taught in your child's public school right now. And I don't care if your public school teacher is a Christian and goes to the same church as you do. That is something that she or he is required by law to report. Things like that. Okay? And this is a requirement in order to get government funds. The schools have to report these things. They have to report them. So, if your child is in public school, they are being exposed to this. They are being exposed to this. Now, it turns out it's actually much, much, much worse than it sounds, because it turns out that SEL springs directly from the occult. I'll repeat that. Social and emotional learning is occult, New Age spirituality repackaged to be placed in our public schools. So, social and emotional learning comes out of a group called the Fetzer Institute. The Fetzer Institute was founded by a man by the name of John Fetzer. He used to own the Detroit Tigers. He was a radio guy, made a lot of money. And his goal was to fuse religion and science into some kind of Eastern spirituality mix. That was what Fetzer was trying to do. He was also a 33rd degree Freemason. Take that for what it's worth. Now, he was really, really, really into spirituality. He would do what are called channelings. Now, if you don't know what a channeling is, it's where somebody conjures up a demon, effectively. Or at least pretends they conjure up a demon. he supposedly channeled the quote-unquote Archangel Michael, and that he would make business decisions, and he would get his advice from this demon. Yeah, think that one through for a few seconds. Now, there were a lot of spiritualists associated in one way or another with the Fetzer Institute. The initial group of people who met to institute social and emotional learning were mostly spiritualists in some way, shape, or form, at least the list that I was able to find. So the group of people there, they were all in some way, a lot of them were tied in some way to the occult, in some way. But the primary satanic thread, if you will, that runs through this whole thing is a woman by the name of Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey. Now, Alice Bailey was an absolute crackpot. She was also a massive spiritualist, but she was a crackpot. And James Lindsay reads some of the stuff in his podcast talking about what exactly social and emotional learning is. And again, I'm not trying to step on Dr. Lindsay's turf. I'm openly stealing from him and trying to put it down into very, very summarized form. And you can go read. This is the Cliff Notes version, if you will. All right? So, Bailey wrote a bunch of books during her time. She was started out as a theosophist, which is a weird form of Gnosticism. Dr. Lindsay goes into more detail about that. She wanted spiritualist practices to proliferate to benefit the world. All right? She was originally a follower of a woman named Helena Blavatsky. Blavatsky is another spiritualist occultist. And Blavatsky also had an influence on someone else you may or may not have heard of. His first name's Adolf, his last name's Hitler. Yeah. Hitler borrowed a lot from Blavatsky. But Blavatsky kicked Bailey out of the group because Blavatsky didn't like the fact that Bailey was doing her own mystic channeling, so Bailey was also calling up demons. And Bailey, who had been, I don't know if she'd been writing extensively by this point or not, but she was writing extensively, and she wanted somewhere to publish her writings. So she founded something to publish her books, called the Lucifer Publishing Company. The Lucifer Publishing Company. Yeah, think about that for a few seconds. The Lucifer Publishing Company. Now, she later would change the name of this to the Lucius Publishing Company. I think Lucifer might have just been a little bit too obvious about what she was really doing. And the Lucius, which renamed itself later to the Lucius Trust when it started getting lots and lots of money from a lot of American philanthropists at the time. And it still gets lots and lots of money. And it's got its tentacles everywhere. Would you believe that the United Nations publishes all of its white papers and so on that it puts out in book form through the Lucius Trust? Would you further believe that the Lucius Trust has its headquarters in the United Nations building? Yeah, look it up. Look it up. Look it up. If they haven't taken it down since Lindsay posted his podcast. Look it up. They also have an office directly across the street from the British Parliament, and one in Geneva, Switzerland. They also have a yearly meditation session for the success of the World Economic Forum meetings. Yeah. Great group of people right here. And these are the people whose ideas, the founder of this group's ideas, are the ones that are influencing social and emotional learning. Like, you don't understand how great of a devotee to Alice Bailey that John Fetzer was. If you listen to Lindsay's podcast, you'll get more. But basically, she was kind of like a cult prophet to him, even though I don't think they ever met. He read her books constantly. He ended meetings with a so-called great invocation that she wrote. He was a devotee. He was all in on Alice Bailey. And he put a lot of Bailey's ideas into the Fetzer Institute, which he used to promote his spiritualistic ideas. Again, this is the Cliff Notes version. There's a lot more to it, and if you want to realize how wacky Alice Bailey is, I'd recommend listening to Lindsay read parts of her book. It's nutso. It's crazy stuff, right? But so Bailey's ideas are now circulating in our schools through social and emotional learning. They've been filtered a couple of times through John Fetzer and the Fetzer Institute, but they are circulating in our schools. The occult ideas of Alice Bailey are circulating in our public schools through social and emotional learning. If you did not realize how great of a pickle we're in, there it is for you. Right? The educator's task, according to social and emotional learning, is to evoke responsibility and relate all subjects to right human relations. That's similar to what Bailey said. Very similar. So that you can get the new age of Aquarius, if you will. If you don't know what the age of Aquarius is, it's basically the coming of the new perfect utopian age, if you will, and the new age ideal. This is insane, and it's also illegal. By the way, if an American school teacher got up there and taught from the Bible, they'd get thrown out. They'd get fired. The school district would get sued. But if they get up and teach this, it's fine. Folks, you should be furious. You should be fuming. You should be losing your minds. Because we have literally allowed satanic occultism to take over our public schools. And I think this backs up the thesis put out there by certain people, Bonson, and I think taken on by maybe Doug Wilson, that you're going to worship somebody. You're going to worship somebody. In American public schools right now, they're worshiping Satan. Or at least they're dabbling with satanic occult nonsense and filling your kids' heads with it. If you aren't homeschooling, do it now. Do it now. Or at least get your kids into a private school that is not going to teach this garbage. Because if your kids are in public schools, this is what they have to deal with. Do you want to have to undo everything that they do and still probably lose that battle? Do you want to lose your kids? Then keep letting them go to these satanic indoctrination centers. And I'm tired of hearing the excuse about missionaries in the system. This is required to get funding. If you're not doing this, you're not getting government funding, and schools don't last long without it. So everybody's doing this. Whether now knowingly or unknowingly is a whole other kettle of fish, but everybody's doing it. In some way, shape, or form. Now, some teachers may say, I'm not personally going to do that, but maybe you've got one teacher in your school district that says, I refuse to do that. It's stupid. It's godless. It's wicked. I won't do it. Now, odds are that teacher gets fired. But even supposing that teacher does not get fired, you have the additional problem. The additional problem being every other class your child goes to is doing it. Get your kids out now. I don't care how much of an inconvenience it is. I don't care how much it's going to cost you. Your kids are worth more. Lindsay's podcast opened with a profane question, but I'll answer it for him. Social and emotional learning is Satanic Gnosticism, and it's being taught to your kids right now. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it?